My name is Vivian Holt. I am 33 years old, and the night my brother raised his glass to tell our whole family I had been fired, I learned how loudly a man will announce another person's failure when he is terrified of his own. It was our parents' 40th anniversary, hosted at Grant's house on the hill. The long table, the chandelier he liked people to notice, 40 white roses down the center, candles end to end. Everything in that room had been arranged to say one thing. The family had a winner, and the winner was him. I had brought a guest that night. A man named Marcus. He sat near the end of the table, quiet, watching us the way a kind stranger watches a family that is not his own. Halfway through dinner, Grant stood and tapped a fork against his glass. Everyone turned. He smiled the smile he always used right before he took something from me and called it a joke. Before the cake, he said, "I want to be honest, because this family runs on honesty." He looked straight at me. My little sister finally lost that precious bank job. Fired, after all these years of lecturing the rest of us about hard work. The table laughed. My mother laughed. A cousin clapped him on the back. Then the man I had brought set down his glass and looked at me. The whole table was still laughing. He was not. What he said next is why I am telling this story. Before I tell you what Marcus said, and what it ended up costing my brother, I want to know where you are listening from right now. Leave the name of your town down in the comments. And while you are there, tell me one thing. Has anyone in your own family ever seemed a little too pleased to announce your worst day out loud? I read every single answer. To understand that night, the story has to begin 2 years earlier. But the way my family saw me began long before that. I was the quiet one. Grant was the bright one. He was 3 years older, loud in a way people called confident, and from the time we were small, every room arranged itself around him. When he made the high school baseball team, our father drove 2 hours to every away game. When I brought home a perfect report card, our mother told me not to brag. Grant broke things and was called spirited. I repaired them and was called dramatic if I ever said so out loud. By the time we were grown, the pattern had set like concrete. Grant was the success the family talked about. I was the daughter they forgot to ask about. For years that took the shape of a joke only I never found funny. The joke was that I had a little job at a bank, that I shuffled papers in a small office, that I was lucky to keep it at all. My father called me a teller long after I had told him, more than once, that I was not one. My mother introduced me to her friends as the one who is still at that bank. Grant called my work busy work. None of them ever asked what I actually did, because the truth did not fit the story they preferred. One Thanksgiving, a cousin who worked in finance asked me a real question about how banks price risk. For 10 minutes, the two of us talked like equals. I watched my mother's face tighten the whole time. When there was a pause, she said brightly that I should go and check on the pies. The cousin never finished his question. I went and checked on the pies. That was how it always went in that house. The moment my work began to look like something, someone found me an apron. Here is the part they never bothered to learn. I had walked into Meridian Trust at 23 and taken a desk near the back, and I had never left. I had climbed instead. Slowly, quietly, the way I did everything. I learned how money moves through a small business. I learned how to read a company's books and find the lie hiding inside a clean-looking page. I learned which loans would be paid back and which ones would quietly sink a family. I was right often enough that the people above me began to notice. One of those people was Marcus Hale. Marcus was the president of the bank. He was a careful man in his late 50s who had built Meridian from a single branch into a name the whole region trusted. He had taken an interest in me when I was still junior. Across 10 years, he had become the closest thing to a mentor I had ever known. He believed in slow, honest work. He believed the loudest person in any meeting was rarely the one worth listening to. He had watched me grow up inside that building, and he treated what I did as if it mattered. That was more than my own family had ever managed. 3 weeks before the anniversary dinner, Marcus had called me into his office and told me the board had approved my promotion. I was to become Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending. In plain words, I would lead the group that decided which businesses in our region got the loans that kept them breathing, and which ones did not. The large ones came to me. I held the final yes and the final no. It was the highest position I had ever held, and I had earned every inch of it without ever once raising my voice. When my mother asked about work that month, I only told her there had been a change, and that I would be moving to a new office. I did not explain. I had stopped explaining a long time before, because explaining had never once made them listen. That one careless sentence, "There had been a change," was the seed my brother would later twist into the word "fired." I invited Marcus to the anniversary dinner because I wanted, just once, for my family to sit at a table beside someone who saw me clearly. He and his wife had become like family over the years. I told myself that if my parents could only meet him, they might finally understand what I had built with my quiet little bank job. I did not know that my brother had been chasing the very same bank for months. I did not know he had a reason to want Marcus on his side that had nothing to do with me. There was one more thing I carried into that room, though no one could see it. 2 years earlier, Grant's company first began to slip. He came to me in private, pale and shaking, and asked for help getting a line of credit. His own numbers were not strong enough to stand alone. So I had done something quiet and dangerous. I signed a personal guarantee. In plain terms, I put my own name on a paper that promised the bank this: if my brother's business ever failed to pay, I would cover the debt myself. I told no one. Not our parents, not Grant's wife. I folded my copy into a plain gray folder and slid it into the back of a drawer, and I did my best to forget it was there. Grant never thanked me. He told the family he had earned the credit on his own, on the strength of his vision, and I let him keep that. I had learned by then that some people can only feel tall while standing on something they refuse to admit is holding them up. That folder in my drawer would come to matter more than anything else in this story. But on the night of the dinner, it was only paper, and my brother was only standing up to make a toast. What I would only understand in the weeks that followed was that my brother was drowning and that he had quietly built his entire escape around me. Ridgeline Builders, the company Grant had bragged about for a decade, was failing. The big development he had staked everything on, a row of houses at the edge of town, had stalled out. Costs had climbed, buyers had walked. He had borrowed against the project, then borrowed again to cover the first loan, then put a second mortgage on his own home to keep the lights on a little longer. The house on the hill, the long table, the chandelier, all of it stood on debt. Debt he was hiding from everyone, including the wife who slept beside him. He needed one more loan, a large one. Large enough to bury every old debt under a single new one and buy himself another year of looking successful. And the bank he had chosen to ask was Meridian Trust. My bank. Grant did not know I had been promoted. In his mind, I was still the little sister with the little job, far beneath anyone who mattered. He worked the bank from the outside, the way he worked everyone. Charm, big talk. A few rounds of golf with a young loan officer named Todd Beck, who was new enough to be impressed and eager enough not to ask hard questions. Grant had heard that the bank's president sometimes turned up at community events. He decided that a few minutes with the man at the top would close the deal on its own. So when Grant saw Marcus walk into his own dining room on the night of our parents' anniversary, he did not see my mentor. He saw a gift. He saw the most powerful banker in the region sitting at his table. And he decided to use the moment. To look like the family's reliable success in front of the man who could save him, he needed a contrast. He needed someone small to stand beside. He had one ready, and she was his sister. His loan application told a very different story than his books did. On paper, he claimed the company was healthy and growing. He listed money coming in that did not exist. He left off the liens against his project and the second mortgage on his house. He made himself look like a safe bet, because a safe bet earns a yes. The development sat frozen behind a chain-link fence. Still, he kept posting photographs of himself at the site, in a clean hard hat, smiling, calling it the future of the neighborhood. He told the family the houses were nearly sold. He told Todd the same thing over lunch, and Todd wrote it down as if it were fact. The gap between the man in the photographs and the numbers on the page kept widening. The wider it grew, the more he needed someone to stand beside and call the failure. He had spent his whole life pointing at me. He saw no reason to stop now. And then he did the thing that turned a desperate man into something colder. He remembered the paper I had signed 2 years before. The personal guarantee. It was still active. It was still sitting in the bank's records with my name on it. With Todd's careless help, Grant structured the new loan so that my old guarantee would carry forward and stand behind it. In plain words, he arranged it so that if his new, far larger loan collapsed, the bank could come to me for the money. He was building a plan in which I quietly paid for his lies. And he built it while standing in a room full of relatives, calling me the failure of the family. He never asked me. He never told me. He was so certain I would never know. So certain I was too small to ever sit in the room where the decision was made. And because of that certainty, he did not bother to hide any of it from the one person alive who would understand exactly what it meant. He had no idea that on Monday morning, the room where that decision would be made was about to become mine. This is what Marcus said at that table. He set down his glass. The laughter began to fade on its own, the way it does when one person at the table refuses to join in. He looked at my brother. Then he looked at the rest of the family. And he spoke in the calm, even voice I had heard him use in 100 difficult meetings. "I think there has been a mistake," he said. "Vivian was not let go from anything. She was promoted 3 weeks ago. I came here tonight to celebrate her. I am only sorry I came on a night like this." No one laughed after that. My mother's smile froze and then slid off her face. A cousin found something interesting in his plate. And my brother, who had spent the whole evening performing for this exact man, went a shade of gray I had never seen on him before. He understood, in that moment, only the smallest part of what he had done. He understood that he had insulted his own sister in front of the powerful banker he had been chasing. He understood that the banker had come to the party as her friend. He did not yet understand the rest. He did not know that the woman he had just called fired now held his future in her hands. That part was still coming. Grant tried to recover the way he always did. He laughed too loudly. "She knows I'm only teasing," he said to the table. Vivian's always been the sensitive one. No one laughed with him this time. My aunt leaned toward me and said, quietly, so only I could hear, "That was not right what he did." It was the first time in years anyone in my family had said such a thing out loud. Grant spent the rest of the night refilling Marcus's water glass and asking about the bank, trying to climb back into a good light. Marcus answered him politely and left early. I drove home in silence, not knowing that the worst and the best of it had not yet happened. 3 days later, a file landed on my desk at Meridian Trust. It was a large commercial loan application. flagged for senior review, which now meant flagged for me. I opened it the way I opened all of them, with a cup of coffee and a quiet hour. Then I read the name of the borrower. Ridgeline Builders. Owner, Grant Holt. For a long moment I did not move. My brother had begged the bank for a loan to save his company. My brother had no idea the bank was me. I did what my training had taught me to do. I did not call him. I did not warn him. I read. And the more I read, the colder I became. The revenue he claimed did not match anything I could verify. The liens against his development were missing from his statements. The second mortgage on his house was nowhere on the page. And then I reached the structure of the loan itself and felt the floor tilt under me. My personal guarantee, the one I had signed 2 years earlier and tried to forget, had been pulled forward to stand behind this new amount. If I did nothing, if I simply let the file move through, my own name would quietly guarantee the very debt that was about to bury him. I took it straight to 2 people I trusted. The first was Priya Nair, the bank's compliance officer, a woman who had never once let a charming man talk her out of a hard question. The second was Marcus. I told them everything. That the borrower was my brother, that the numbers were false, that an old guarantee with my name on it had been attached to the file without my knowledge or my consent. Priya listened, then said the thing I already knew. You cannot touch this file, Vivian, not to approve it, and not to deny it. The moment you decide your own brother's loan, every choice you make looks personal. She was right. If I said no to Grant, the family would call it revenge for the dinner. They would say I had used my power to crush him. So I made the only choice that kept my hands clean. I removed myself from the decision entirely. I signed a formal disclosure stating that the borrower was my brother, and I recused myself from any vote on his application. I would not be the one to ruin him. The file would be judged by others, on its own merits, by people with no reason to be cruel and no reason to be kind. I thought that settled it. I thought stepping back was both the right thing and the safe thing. I was wrong about the safe part. Because the guarantee was still active. As long as that paper stood, my name was bound to my brother's debt, whether I voted or not. Recusing myself protected my honor. It did not protect me from the trap Grant had already built. If his loan was approved by the others on his false numbers and then collapsed, the bank could still come to me for the money. Stepping aside was not enough. To be truly free of it, the truth would have to surface first, the truth about that guarantee, and about everything else inside that file. It would have to come into the open before anyone signed a single page, and it would have to come out in a way no one could ever call my revenge. The family found out about the dinner's aftermath before they found out about the loan, and they decided the villain of the evening was me. My mother called first. She did not ask how I felt about being called fired in front of 40 people. How could you embarrass your brother like that, she said. In front of an important guest? I reminded her that Grant was the one who had lied. She sighed. You were always too sensitive about a harmless joke. My father got on the phone and said the family did not air its problems in public. He said it as though I had been the one standing up with a glass in my hand. Then, Grant learned that his loan had stalled, that it had been pulled for deeper review, and the calls changed. He did not know yet that I had seen his file. He only knew the easy path had closed, and he assumed, correctly, that I was somehow near it. He called me one evening, and for the first time in years his voice did not carry that comfortable edge of contempt. It carried fear. I need you to talk to your people at the bank, he said. Just put in a word. You owe me that much, after the scene you caused. I told him I could not do that. I told him I was not allowed to be involved in his loan at all. You're really going to let me sink, he said, over a joke at a party. I said nothing about the false numbers. I said nothing about the guarantee. I only told him that I was not the reason his loan was in trouble and that I could not help him. That was when his anger cracked open and something honest fell out. "If this does not go through, I lose everything," he said, and his voice broke on the word everything. The house. Cole's room is in that house. Renee does not even know how bad it is. "Do you understand what you are doing to my family?" For one moment I felt the old pull. He was still my brother. I remembered him at 17, telling our father a broken window was his fault when it had been mine, taking the blame so I would not be punished. There had been a time when he protected me. I had not made that up. But I also remembered the fork against the glass, the word fired, the laughter, the paper with my name on it, quietly arranged to make me pay for his fall. "I do hear you," I told him, "and I am sorry you are afraid. But you did not come to me as a brother who needed help. You went to my family as a man who needed someone to look down on. And you put my name on your debt without asking. I will not lie for you, and I will not pay for you. Not again." He called me cold. He told me our father was ashamed of me. He said that if I let him fall, I was no sister of his. The calls did not stop with him. An aunt I had not heard from in 2 years left a message about blood being thicker than water. A cousin texted to say the whole family was talking about what I was doing to Grant. My father left a voicemail asking, in a tired voice, when I had become so hard. Not one of them asked what Grant had done to me. The story had already been written, the way it always was. In that story, I was the one with the cold heart, and Grant was only a brother who had ever wanted the best for everyone. I had heard a version of that sentence my whole life, every time I refused to shrink. So this time, I did not argue. I told him that all of it now sat with the bank, where it belonged, and that he should speak with his loan officer. Then, I set the phone down on the counter and let it go quiet. My mother sent one more message that night. It said that a good daughter would find a way to fix this for her brother. I read it twice. Then I thought of all the years I had spent fixing things no one ever saw, and I understood something I should have understood much sooner. They had never wanted a daughter. They had wanted a safety net. And a net only matters to the people falling into it on the day they finally feel it give. The decision on Grant's loan came to a head on a gray Tuesday morning in a glass-walled conference room on the top floor of Meridian Trust. Grant had been told there would be a final meeting to review his application. Todd, still hopeful, still charmed, had let him believe it was a formality, the last step before the money came through. So, my brother arrived in his best suit, carrying the same confidence he had carried into our parents' dining room. He shook hands in the lobby. He told the receptionist he was there to close his deal. He did not know who would be sitting at the table. I was there. Not to vote. I had recused myself, and the record showed it. I was there to do the one thing integrity required of me. I would place the truth on the table in person. Then, I would remove myself from the room. Marcus sat at the head. Priya sat to his right, with the file open in front of her. 2 other officers filled the chairs. And the chair across from all of us waited for my brother. When the door opened and Grant walked in, I watched the exact moment the floor disappeared beneath him. He saw Marcus first, and his face lifted because here was the powerful friend from the party, surely on his side. Then his eyes moved down the table and found me. He stopped. The confident handshake died halfway out of his arm. He turned back to Marcus and tried the old smile. "There's been a mix-up here," he said. "Marcus, you know me." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "I do," he said. "That is the problem. Marcus spoke first, in that same calm voice. Mr. Holt, before we begin, I will let our Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending say a few words. I believe the two of you are acquainted. The room was very quiet. I heard the building hum. I heard a pen roll against the glass. I looked at my brother, the boy who once pulled glass from a window so I would not be blamed, the man who had stood up at a family dinner and called me fired in front of this very table. And I did not raise my voice. Grant, I said, I am the Senior Vice President who oversees this division. Your loan came to my desk for senior review. Because you are my brother, I have removed myself from any decision on it. I will not approve it, and I will not deny it. I am not here to punish you. I am here to make sure that everything inside this file is seen clearly by the people who will decide. Then, I am going to leave the room. He stared at me. 3 weeks earlier, I had been the little sister with the little job, fired, a punchline for the cake. Now I was the title at the top of the very building where he had come to beg for his life. The boss who had been sitting right there at his table had come to celebrate me, and he had insulted me to that man's face. You did this, he whispered. No, I said, I never touched your file. I was not allowed to, and I did not want to. The truth was already inside it. I only made sure no one looked away from it. Then I nodded to Priya, gathered my folder, and walked out, exactly as I had promised. But I did not go far. I stood in the hallway, and through the glass wall I watched the truth do what I had refused to do with my own hands. Priya laid it out one page at a time, in the flat, fair voice of someone reading facts. The revenue Grant had claimed did not exist. The bank had verified it. The liens against his development were real and undisclosed. The second mortgage on his home was real and undisclosed. The company was not growing. It was insolvent, held together by debt stacked on debt. On those facts alone, she said, the loan could not be approved by any honest officer. One of the other officers, a man who had golfed with Grant only weeks before, did not lift his eyes from the page. The other set her pen down very softly, as if a loud sound might somehow make it worse. No one argued with Priya. There was nothing in the file left to argue with. And then she reached the last page, and she set it where Grant could see it. It was my personal guarantee, the folded gray paper I had signed 2 years earlier and hidden in a drawer. This guarantee was attached to the new loan without the guarantor's knowledge or consent, Priya said. It cannot stand, and it should never have been used. Then she explained, without anger, what the file had tried to do. It had pulled that old paper forward to stand behind the new loan, binding my name to a debt I had never agreed to carry. Through the glass, I watched my brother understand all of it at once, that his lies were on the table, that the sister he had mocked had quietly saved his company 2 years before, with her own name and her own risk, and had told no one, that he had repaid that by trying to make her pay for his ruin, and that he had announced her as the family failure in front of the one man who could have saved him, and the one woman who already had. The loan was denied that morning. Not by me, by the truth, read aloud by people with no reason to lie. Grant did not shout. He had no glass to tap and no room full of relatives to perform for. He simply sat while the facts finished. Then he stood and came out into the hallway, where I was waiting. He stopped beside me for a moment. You could have warned me, he said. Quietly, I looked at him for a long time. You did not warn me, I said, before you signed my name to your debt. I can still fix this, he said. Just tell them I can fix the numbers. The numbers were never the problem, Grant. He had no answer to that. For once in our lives he had nothing left to say, and no one left to blame. Then he walked past me toward the elevator, alone. My brother lost more than a loan that morning. Within a month, Ridgeline Builders closed its doors. The development was sold off to cover what he owed. The house on the hill went on the market by the end of the season. Long table and chandelier and all. Renee finally learned how bad it had been. She did not learn it from him. She learned it from the bank. Cole's room became a room in a rented apartment across town. Grant lost the company. He lost the house. And he lost the story he had been selling for years, the story in which he was the success and I was the one who could not keep a job. People have asked me since whether I feel guilty, whether I destroyed my brother. I did not. And the difference matters more to me than anything else in this story. Revenge would have been signing my name to ruin him. What I did was refuse to sign my name to save him again, and then let the truth speak in a room where his charm could not reach it. I did not push him off the ledge. I only stopped being the thing that had been quietly holding him on it. My parents did not speak to me for a long while. When my mother finally called, she asked, in a small voice, whether the bank might still help if I only said the word. Even then, even after all of it, I told her what I had come to understand. That I had never been the family failure. I had been the family's foundation, and they had only noticed the foundation on the day they felt it refused to hold their weight any longer. The gray folder is back in my drawer now, the guarantee inside it voided and finished, my name freed from it for good. I keep it not as a wound, but as a reminder. The loudest person in the room is rarely the one holding it up. The person holding it up is usually too busy holding to make a sound. A year after that anniversary, I sat at a much smaller table, in my own home, with Marcus and his wife and 2 friends from the bank. Someone lifted a glass and tapped it gently, just to gather the room before a kind toast. The sound stopped my breath for half a second, the way it had that night on the hill. Then I looked around at the faces of people who had seen me clearly all along, and I let the sound mean something new. Not a verdict handed down about my worth, just a small, warm bell ringing for a woman who had finally stopped explaining herself to people who were never going to listen. So let me ask you one thing before you go. Have you ever been torn down by the very person who was secretly leaning on you the whole time? Tell me below.